Good morning and welcome to the July 17th edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Market Report. My name's Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to all the new patrons. I hope you find this. It's invariably Patreon email messages. The notifications of this will invariably wind up in your spam folder. So I would expect everybody just quickly, if not soon, if you get this one, great. Whitelist from Patreon, because this is how you're going to find this is how you get both of these every week from me, as well as the announcements about the new issues of the newsletter and whatnot. So, but I do appreciate everybody who stopped by and decided to put their hard-earned money on the table. It is greatly appreciated. We are closing in on the first of a couple of milestones I have for this project. So, as an independent going concern, so I think it's a great thing to see that happen. It's quite gratifying for me and everybody else. So let's move on to the next thing, because we've got a bunch to talk about today, and I still want to try and keep this under 25 to 28 minutes. All right, so we're going to talk about Turkey now, and I'm going to do some freeballing, or maybe some spitballing and some freewheeling here a little bit, as I kind of need to talk these ideas through before I sit down to write something about them. There's a lot going on with Turkey. Turkey's been in the news a lot recently on multiple fronts. You've got the S-400 sale from Russia. You've got Erdogan militarily defending Turkey, drilling off of the Cyprus coast. You've got the potential for sanctions from the United States, which hasn't happened yet. You've got Erdogan firing the head of a central bank and effectively taking it over. You've got doom and gloom everywhere and in all corners of the world. And at the same time, Turkey's now pushed into northern Iraq, attacking the Kurds in northern Iraq, but not going any further in Syria. Meanwhile, the Syrian Arab Army and the Russians, with Russian air support, are slowly but surely cleaning up Idlib province in Syria. Now, Erdogan is generally thought of in the West as completely insane and the dictator and all of these things. And all of those things are probably true. At the same time, he's the ultimate political cockroach. He survives everything. And he is someone not to be underestimated. Okay. The S-400 sales are complicated for a couple of reasons. The first is that the United States does not want Turkey running a NATO member, running S-400s, and integrating it into their anti-air systems, because the S-400s collect data. They are as much a data collection device as they are anything else. More so than the S-300s, more so than any other previous version of Russia's anti-missile systems. From what I understand, and I've read a couple of different articles about this. The threat, of course, is stealth. That over the course of time, the longer the S-400s are operational, it stops the United States from being able to fly planes over the areas that they're covering, because those S-400s are covering, because when integrated fully into a nation's air defense systems, they will be collecting data and signatures on all the stealth planes, and eventually they will crack the stealth by multiple points of triangulation, yada yada. Technically, I don't understand. I only just barely scratch the surface of understanding the technology involved. I just understand that that's the takeaway, and I think that's what the biggest thing for the United States is. Understand that Turkey is most likely going to put these S-400s on Cyprus to protect their oil and gas interests there, not for the purposes of making Turkey energy independent, because it will never be so, right? But because it infringes on Israel's claims in the region. It also, and now Erdogan and Erdogan and Israel are on the outs over the Syria policy. And remember, go back to 2016's attempted coup against Erdogan, which he fundamentally believes and is right about this. There's no probably about it, and is right that it was an operation fomented from within his own armed forces by the United States and likely Israel, which is where everything in Syria changed. Syria would not be in the state it's in today if Erdogan had not changed sides. Okay. We were going to blame all of Syria's problems on him and then use that as a means by which to take him out. The rhetoric in the late 2015, all through 2016, was about how unstable he was and yada, yada, yada. It was all about that. But secretly behind the scenes, he had been rebuilding relationships, his relationship with the Syrian government and discussing with the Russians as to what to do. He could see what was happening. And so Turkey is incredibly important. And Putin has run a 4-year operation now to flip Turkey out of NATO's orbit. And every day, bit by bit by bit, Turkey is moving out of NATO's orbit. And the S-400 sale is the kind of thing where Trump either has to kick Erdogan and Turkey out of NATO, which they can't do if they want to maintain any presence in the Middle East because of Incirlik and the airbase. Without Incirlik, we just don't have the kind of coverage that we would want to be able to strike Russia. But yeah, we could put air bases in Jordan or whatever. That's fine, and that's going to put them, close enough to strike Iran. That's not the issue. The issue is Russia. And Incirlik and getting the Americans out of Incirlik is absolutely one of Putin's top priorities. And at this point, it's something that he's been negotiating with Erdogan over and over and over again. So all of these things are tied together. And Turkey being allowed to attack the Kurds in northern Iraq near Erbil. And note this morning that there was the what looks like an assassination of a high-ranking Turkish official and a couple of other people in Erbil. It looks to me like there's either been a deal made behind the scenes, and I'm not sure about this, but I've read a couple of different conflicting arguments about this, or that this is his next move, and he's been threatening this move for a while now to push the Kurds and push the United States and the United States relation with the Kurds to its breaking point, because he's incredibly angry with the United States for how they've treated Turkey and how they treated and in our push to try and create an independent Kurdistan, balkanize the entire region, carve up Turkey, carve up Syria, carve up Iraq, carve up Iran. That's the plan. Okay, that is the plan of people like John Bolton and the rest of them. It's not going to work. It's obviously not working. As has been said many times, and everybody should know, Turkey is the second largest standing army in NATO. It is the gateway to Europe. It is the keeper of the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. It's the keeper of the Black Sea. Putting S-400s on Cyprus extends the ability of the Russians to out beyond the Bosphorus to the Eastern Mediterranean. The United States loses operational control from a military standpoint if S-400s are deployed all around that region of the world, that region of Turkey, which is exactly where they're going to go. So I can't explain to you how important this is, and I can't even put it all together in a kind of coherent article, even though I need to do so. I punted yesterday. I tried for 2 hours yesterday to put all this together and then write about that for my upcoming article for Strategic Culture, and had to punt and write about Trump and Iran. Thankfully, Trump bailed me out yesterday with his statements about no regime change in the cabinet meeting with Iran. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a coherent article for Strategic Culture this week. So you guys get to be a little bit of a guinea pig this week. I haven't talked about much of this at all, other than a couple of brief comments on a live stream recently. So this is all literally me thinking off the top of my head as I put all these things together, and what it all means. I know what it means in the end. The question is, which is that Turkey's going to leave NATO. The bigger question is the timing and when it's going to happen, or what's going to happen and what's the fallout if it does happen, and how does Trump respond to this? These are all very good questions. And maybe that's just the article I should write at this point, as opposed to trying to say, I know what the future is going to look like. I tend to overdo this, and as opposed to I want to go right to this is what we're going to do, as opposed to just saying, here are all the questions we should be asking. Maybe I'll just write that article after I get done with this. So I said I wouldn't go on for a long time today, but this is the major discussion for the day, because we now move to Iran, and the situation with Iran, which is just as important, right? Yesterday, Trump came out and said, the regime change is not our goal. We just want them out of Yemen. Well, okay, well, that's easy. Gone. And Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, yeah, we would like you to stop sending $80 billion a year worth of weapons to the region. Couldn't you do that? If you did that, we would have no desire or need to be supporting the Houthis in Yemen, supporting Hezbollah militarily or any of the rest of it. If you would stop arming everybody, we would stop counter-arming everybody. It's not that hard to understand. And everybody's hailing this as the ballistic missile, Iran's ballistic missile program is now on the table finally. No. That's Pompeo trying to set the table for negotiations. That's not on the table at this point. Iran's ballistic missile program is not on the table at this point. But that's ultimately what Trump wants, and that's fine. But let's start with the beginning. See, the war in Yemen is deeply unpopular here in the United States. Even Congress doesn't like it. So getting Trump to start the process of rolling back this disastrous escalation against Iran can be solved easily in Yemen. Give the Iranians what they want, which is what Congress wants, which is to stop supporting the Saudis in Yemen. Period. And unfortunately, Trump has already vetoed one bill on this, but he had to do so back in March because he was trying to get he was trying to push the maximum pressure campaign to try and get the Palestinians to sign on to, and everybody to pressure to sign on to the Kushner Netanyahu surrender document that they call the deal of the century for the Palestinians. None of that's going to work. He's going to have to now give up in Yemen. He's going to have to tell bin Salman, you're on your own. And if Iran pulls back out of Yemen, then if they'll basically wind down the war, then Trump can also at that point start to pull back some of the sanctions. He can pull back the sanctions on the IRGC. Because if they pull back, remember, Netanyahu and Trump have already screwed up a major bit of diplomacy on the part of Putin. Last year, Putin negotiated a withdrawal of all IRGC troops and materiel 100 kilometers from the Golan Heights. And the Israelis continued to bomb. And they shut down the Russian Elan plane. And all those Iranian forces moved right back up to the Golan. Hezbollah is back in that. And Hezbollah wanted to go home. Hezbollah was done in Syria. The Iranians were mostly done in Syria. All we had to do, including Erdogan, including the United States, was allow us to wipe out the rest of the Al-Qaeda in Idlib without worry. And all of this would be over, but John Bolton wouldn't have it. Netanyahu wouldn't have it. There is no potential for peace as long as these men are around. And I think Trump finally understands this. And so something has to change. And so we've got some interesting stuff happening now. But it's going to have to start there because Trump can't just immediately back down completely on Iran and look weak. He can't just he wants a new JCPOA, but he's not going to get one without first getting rid of the sanctions. That's not going to happen. He's not going to stop Iran's quote-unquote nuclear program if he continues the way he's going. Okay? It's just not going to happen. The Iranians aren't stupid. The way to get the United States to the table is to enrich uranium, which we don't want them doing. We don't want them getting a bomb. They already have the ballistic missile. All they need is the uranium. They already have the technology. The North Koreans built the bomb for them. They have the ballistic missile. Now all they need to do is enrich uranium. Maybe Netanyahu is right, finally, for the first time in 25 years, that the Iranians are 18 months away from a nuclear weapon. Well, guess what? Now's the time to negotiate. And how do you negotiate with somebody? You negotiate by... Iran is doing to Trump exactly what Trump is trying to do to them. Trump is trying to destroy them economically and raising the stakes every day, and Iran keeps raising the stakes on him. Say, look, we'll just build the bomb, and then you can't bomb us anymore. Then you're done. This is over. The other possibility is that Iran already has the bomb. which no one wants to talk about. So this thing needs to get de-escalated and quickly. And that's that. And Pompeo will continue to just watch Pompeo. He will continue to try and wriggle around this and try and position Trump where he needs to. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Pompeo is Trump's toady, and he will do exactly what Trump tells him to do, though he will every once in a while try to push message around that. Because he's still a crazy Christian Zionist and a frickin' odious, disgusting man with a very small worldview. And there's not a lot you can do about that. And he's loyal to Trump, so Trump's going to keep him. So as long as he continues to exhibit loyalty to Trump, he will stay in office. And that's ultimately what he wants. That's more important, I think, than anything else. But we'll see. All right. I was asked by a subscriber the other day to talk about what happened in uranium a few days ago. I'm going to do so now, but I'm going to do so when I get to the chart of uranium. It's not particularly a big deal. And then we'll talk about the situation in gold, Bitcoin, and the Dow. So let's get you out of here, and I'll let you on your way. All right, so here are the charts. So looks like, on Sunday, minus this bar, this is a very noisy top. Now we've got this very, very tight trading range, no volatility here on gold. Look at the succession of, now we've got two back-to-back inside bars. That's interesting, right? No, breaking neither the previous high nor the previous low. So this bar is within the range of this bar is within the range of that bar. Barring, all puns aside, barring anything untoward in the next 48 hours, gold will probably close within the range of this bar. We'll have back-to-back inside bars, and this is setting up for another explosion higher, I would say. That this is a volatile and this is a volatile kind of new plateau that's being built here above 1400. That's what we're seeing. So watch this to see if I'm right about that. We'll talk about this on Sunday. We'll try and I am leaving for New Mexico on Sunday morning. Well, I should have time to get one of these out the door Sunday morning. I'll prep the slides Saturday night. I'll record it first thing Sunday morning before I get out of here, and then get on the road. So I'll try and get everything done and get it uploaded and to y'all Sunday. But I don't know if I'll get one out on Wednesday or not. We'll just have to see. I actually don't know if my laptop has all the tools to produce one of these, so I have to actually look at that as well. All right. So right now, gold looks like it's coiling, and it's waiting for a signal as to which way it needs to go. And in my mind, it looks like it wants to go higher. Okay. On the other hand, the same kind of thing was happening in Bitcoin until yesterday. And it looks to me like, I told you from the beginning that this run up here got parabolic and ugly. This is very similar to the kind of pattern. If you look at the monthly chart of Bitcoin that was traced there, you've got a high, a low, a lower high, and now we're into another bear market trend here. And I think all the excitement in the cryptos is probably over for the next couple of months. But we'll see. Again, and then now we're into the mode of trying to figure out where's the support. Well, 9,000 was support this morning or last night. 8,500 looks interesting, right? A couple of peaks in here at 8,500. This whole range right in here looks interesting. Okay, so don't be surprised as long as we don't break all the way back down to 6 or 4, everything's fine. Most likely, we're going to hold in this area here. A break back down into the 8,000 area. Maybe a spike down to 7, but I sincerely doubt it. It would be technically bearish if it did that. Breaking down into this region is kind of expected, given the severity of the run-up. Okay, so this will probably be a major top for the next few months, as the euphoria over the concept of the halving, the halvening, goes away, and we start to get back into what are we dealing with. We're also at this point dealing with maybe a lull in it's like the safe haven trade is going to go through kind of rotation. First it's Bitcoin's turn, then it's gold's turn, then it's the Dow's turn, then it's and bonds the entire time, and just kind of keep rotating around, and they're going to do that a lot. It's similar to how the central banks did round robin QE for the last 10 years. First it was the US, first it was the Fed, then it was the ECB, then it was the BOJ's turn, then it was the SNB, then it was back to the US, and they were just 6 or 8 months worth of or 12 to 18 months worth of QE program from each of the major central banks, and they would just keep printing the money and bailing each other out and keeping liquidity high. And that's how they did it. And that's how they managed it. And they did. I mean, it was very obvious. If you go back and look through the historical record, it's pretty obvious. I don't know. None of that stuff feels like the historical record to me. It all just like literally feels like yesterday. It's like when you have the kind of memory that I have, everything feels like it's current news. You know, it really does. It's funny. I think about, I walk through my house and I think about my wife's dog, Phoebe. She's a beautiful and unbelievable German Shepherd. And, Phoebe was an uncommon dog, and I don't really think of Phoebe in the past. I see that picture of her, I'm just waiting for her to walk through the living room. I don't know about you guys, but that's just the way it is. But it's a weird thing. So just understand that a lot of this stuff, like everything has happened in the market since 2008, all just feels like it's just one big continuous story, and it's all part of the bank. It just all feels like the present. But it's 10 years old. Get used to it. It's going to be like this for however long I'm allowed to do this based on you guys, and however long we have this relationship. This is the way my mind is going to work. Just a little insight. All right, let's talk about uranium real quick. Excuse me. I remember when I first went to the New Orleans Investor Conference back in November of 2013. I sat in a talk by Marin Katusa over at the time I think he was working for Agora, talking about uranium and Russia and Putin and all of this stuff. And it was I was just starting to go down that rabbit hole back in 2013. And Marin kind of pushed me helped push me on the path I'm on today. I wound up reading his book, The Colder War, which was very good. It's a little neoconish. And I learned a lot, right? Okay, great. But back then, Marin was saying that everybody wanted to know about uranium, and everybody was saying, and Marin was right. He's like, look, the uranium market's not going anywhere for years as Russians continue to bleed off their old uranium warheads and turn them into SWUs, not single work units is another word for it. Back into your refined fuel, which is then sold off to the as fuel for the reactors around the world. That there's all that nuclear stockpile was being disgorged by the Russians, converted from warheads back into usable fuel rods, and that was had a depressing effect on the market. It was the price of uranium was going to continue to drop, and he said for the next couple of years, he figured it would maybe in 2015, by 2015, maybe it would get better, and because they would be done by the end of 2014. And look, we had this, but then I haven't really followed it much since then. I do believe that uranium is the kind of thing that once it bottoms, this is the kind of grinding bear market that creates shortages. This is the kind of grinding bear market that eventually will see explosive price movements to the upside, like this one, like we've seen in palladium at times, and like we'll see at times in platinum, and eventually similar to what we'll see in silver once silver fully transitions from a monetary asset to a commodity, to an industrial commodity, which it hasn't done yet, but I think it will do so certainly before the end of my lifetime. Okay. Uranium has no stock-to-flow ratio. If we've talked about that from a perspective of whether it has any monetary character. It has zero monetary character. So it's a very volatile thing based purely on supply and demand fundamentals. So the price obviously bottomed here in 2017, similar to gold. Along with this is just gold, oil, the whole commodity space. This would be almost considered peak deflation, where everything just collapsed. But to understand that with uranium at $18 a pound, there are very few at these prices, $40, $45, $50 a pound. There's very little uranium in the world that is profitable. There's only a couple of places on the whole planet that you can mine for uranium. One of them is the Athabasca Basin in Canada, and the rest of them are in Kazakhstan and Russia. And there's a couple others around the world, but there's not much. The Athabasca Basin is the big one in Canada. If you're interested in investing in uranium, I have a couple of small uranium stocks. I've always been kind of high on for a long time, but we're talking going back 7 years now, and I haven't been following them particularly in the last couple of years because there's really been no point because, come on, it's uranium. It's it may be a dead industry, but I think looking at this monthly chart now, it may not be. Simply that we had a bottom in 2017 and now we're moving higher. But for in general, right, what we're looking at is for what happened earlier in the week or last week was that Trump was considering the recommendation of Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary, who's a man stuck in the 19th century, no less the 20th century, on putting import quotas in on uranium in order to, I guess, spur development here in the United States because we don't produce anything. We don't produce any U3O8 in the United States. We have some deposits, but we have nothing interesting. At this point, we produce about 1% of the yellow cake that we need to run our reactors. And I've made this point many times, and I go back to an article I wrote in 2017 that said that Russia has the sanctions hammer in the United States. All they have to do is stop selling us uranium fuel, and we would be in serious trouble because the Russians control somewhere north of 40% of the downstream uranium market. Kazakhstan produces something like 50 to 60% of the world's yellow cake. It's refined in Russia, and it's sent around the world. Now, the French also refine a lot because they run their entire economy on nuclear power, yada, yada, yada. But, the truth is that the Russians have an almost monopoly, or at least the Russia-Kazakhstan marriage has a near monopoly on the entire uranium market. Upstream, downstream, midstream, and downstream. What do I mean by upstream, midstream, and downstream? For those of you who are not oil guys, upstream is exploration, midstream is transportation, downstream is refining. Right? So that's just the way it is. And with the number of nuclear power plants that Rosatom is building around the world for China, India, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, all of these countries are getting Russian-built nuclear power plants. The Russians just sent a floating uranium power plant to the Arctic to power the town that they have. The town that they have out there is an exploration town, oil exploration town, and transit hub for the northern sea route for moving natural gas, right, along the Arctic. Okay, the truth is that, and they can make more of those. Okay, and they can send them around the world to places that don't have access to fresh water or would easily be able to bring in that kind of power, yada yada yada. So there's rising demand for uranium in the world. I don't say that uranium's not in a bull market, but I think it's in a nascent bull market, kind of like silver is. It wants to be in a bull market, but it's not there yet. Okay? And Trump rejected, and I think the uranium market, of course, as always, gets ahead of itself the minute there's oh my God, we're going to get something good, and the stocks explode to the upside, and then Trump turns around and goes, no, we can't put quotas on this. If we put quotas on imports from various countries around the world just because Wilbur Ross hates the freaking Russians, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, we would stop, the United States economy will grind to a halt tomorrow. And understand that our nuclear power plants provide the baseload for the entire country. They provide a stable 5% baseload for the entire country in an integrated network. You do realize that, right? Or mostly integrated network. Okay? I mean, without uranium, we don't enjoy the kind of lifestyle that we have because our nuclear power plants generate electricity at an unbelievably cheap level. And that if we had to replace that with natural gas, electricity prices in the United States would double. Minimal. At a minimum, they would double. And I'm dead serious. Okay? So, what happened the other day is Trump just said, look, no quotas. No import quotas. We can't do this. And he's right, because here's the thing. You can't, this is not like spinning up a steel mill where you can, you can fly some girders and pour some concrete and boom, you can have a new steel mill or a new aluminum mill spun up in 18 months. It takes 10 years or 15, it takes 10 to 12 years to develop a uranium mine. Anybody who understands anything about exploration knows that you start today, you're going to be staring at a hole in the ground for the next 8 to 10 years. Okay? I'm looking at gold projects that I've been following for 6 years, and they're still in the exploration phase because the market's not been there for them to convert it into a going concern yet, because the market doesn't need that resource yet. Gold Standard Ventures is a perfect example. They've got a perfectly great land package that they're not willing to sell at $1 a share, waiting for the market to come to them. And I think they're right to do so. Again, stocks like that are open-ended options contracts against the rising price of gold. And when gold's $2,000 an ounce, one of the majors is going to come in and is going to buy that thing. It's either Newmont, who's right around the corner, or Barrick, or Goldcorp, or someone, right? Same thing. You have to look at the uranium projects that are ready to start pulling stuff out of the ground, and then realize that none of them are in the United States. So putting on import quotas is stupid. It's just counterproductive, and we're not going to spin up new uranium mines anytime soon. It'll take a decade. Yeah, if you get rid of some of the EPA regulations, you get down to 7 years. Woo, 7 years. I got news for you guys. I don't think the United States. I think the way we're going politically, the United States might not last 7 years. So, what are we talking about here? So protectionism just failed. That's why some of the uranium stocks got whacked the other day. It had everything to do with Trump not putting quotas and effectively tariffs on uranium imports, which was the smart thing to do, because honestly, if you want to look at a mechanism, and this is why the Uranium One story actually bothers me. If you want to look at a mechanism by which you can see a building of a new relationship between the Russians and the United States, it would be over uranium. The fact is that we went after that. These people put out the nonsense story about Uranium One. About Hillary selling off 25% of our uranium reserves. Woo, reserves. Who gives a shit? They're reserves. It's not like anybody's drilling those reserves. It's just a land package. It's not like that can't be nationalized. It's not like we can't force the company to sell them. Just tell the Russians they can't own it anymore. Just lock them up. It's and it's not like it's a lot, because it's not like we have a lot of uranium reserves. So it's a dumb story. And unfortunately, too many conservatives and too many in the MAGA crowd, fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. All right, so that's enough about uranium. But it is good. But looking at this chart for the first time in a couple of years, uranium is getting interesting. I may have to dust off some of my old research on this and see if there's anything interesting to present to y'all in the next couple of months. But I am looking at this $26 level going, that's pretty interesting. From a 28 would be better, 30 would be even better. But if this volatile yet this ugly yet well-defined uptrend is holding, well then, and the United States doesn't put quotas on anything, as each new nuclear power plant comes into play, we know what the supply looks like, and we know that the world hasn't really developed any new uranium mines recently because of the desperate situation here. I mean, if you can't get money for gold at $1,300, gold mine at $1,300 an ounce, you're gonna get uranium funding at $20 a pound. It's not gonna happen. All right, let's talk about food prices. I'm gonna do this. I got to do this real quick though. So interestingly enough, I've been warning you about this, talking about the weather and whatnot for a while now, on and off. I know I did my first look at wheat like last year. I want you to understand that we're getting to that point where corn prices are now breaking on a weekly basis above these former highs here, which really should not matter. This is a breakout bar. This is important. The gold prices, corn prices are going to $5 a bushel at a minimum. Now, I went looking for something to talk in relation to that. I didn't see anything much. So wheat still hasn't broken out yet. Soybeans haven't broken out, but I did notice this. These bars here that I've got highlighted are all July. Notice how hog prices are very cyclical, and they turn in July. When we get a number as to what's going to happen in the corn harvest for that year, when we get a good estimate of the corn harvest, invariably the hog prices rise, and then we get an estimate of what the corn harvest is going to be, and then hog prices collapse, and then they do it again, and they collapse, and they do it again, and they collapse, and it's very cyclic based on the price of corn. Well, guess what? This July, we didn't get a full collapse. We're now moving higher again. And this is telling you that we could see pork prices in excess of, $100 per hundredweight or $1 a pound at the wholesale level. That's what lean hog futures are. They're done by the hundredweight, so $100 a pound. So this is what hog carcasses are going for, right? 79 cents a pound. I know these things because I used to go to freaking livestock auctions and shit when I was thinking about doing that stuff. I was thinking about raising meat goats and trying to get an idea. I literally used to go up to the livestock auction in Ellisville and sit in the only room in Florida in 2015 that you could smoke in. Because who was going to tell the guys at the livestock auction in Ellisville that they couldn't smoke there? It was awesome, actually. It was like walking into the 1970s. Was kind of cool. Ashtrays on the seats, the whole 9 yards. It was very cool. So yeah, this is interesting to me that we're seeing a correlation now and between the feedstock and the livestock. All right, last thing to talk about is the Dow real quick. Nothing really crazy here. We had a breakout on last week. We opened high this week. Volatility fell a little bit this week. Nothing important. Again, still didn't get that changed. That's fascinating. And a very non-volatile week in the Dow after this big move last week, and then not much. It's actually a good sign that we're getting impulse moves up and very low volatility. Impulse moves up and low volatility. That means that the market is just not. It's not subject to tremendous swings in emotion. It's just a considered and regular rear guard movement by the shorts. They get burned a little bit, and then they come back in, and they get burned again, and they come back, and eventually this thing is going to take off. But for right now, this is a very structured uptrend, a very structured bull market uptrend in the Dow. Again, another aspect of the whole safe haven trade. All right, I think that's enough. I think that's what I've got for this Wednesday morning. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, things you want me to cover, leave them in the comments to this article on Patreon, or DM me on Twitter, or talk to me on Slack, or wherever you can find me. Or I don't know, send a passenger pigeon. I'm good either way. I don't care. All right, so you guys take care. You have a great day. We will talk soon. We'll talk Sunday. I promise. Keep your stick on the ice.